Oh, well, this is exciting. Earlier today, we're being told tourists and National Trust rangers saw the legendary Finn disappear into a magical doorway within the rock face here at the Giant's Causeway.
The drone hovered over a high cliff on the Irish coast. It spotted a thin, straight line in the grey rock. As the camera zoomed in, the heavy stone began to slide. It moved slowly and smoothly, like a door on a track. This was no accident of nature. Behind the slab, a dark tunnel led deep into the earth. The air that blew out was cold and smelled of old dust. Nature doesn't build in straight lines. What they found behind changes everything. The geometry of silence. The stone did not crack. It moved. On the screen, the drone's view showed a massive block of limestone sliding into a hidden slot in the cliffside. There was no grinding sound, only the smooth motion of a machine. This was a door made of 5 tons of solid rock, hidden for thousands of years under the green moss and gray rain of the Irish coast. As the gap widened, the drone's light hit a long, narrow hallway made of flat stones. The walls were dry. The floor was level. This was a masterwork of engineering found in a place where only sheep and wind usually go. Ancient builders in Ireland were obsessed with the weight of the world. They didn't just pile rocks, they balanced them. In places like the Burren, the ground is naturally split into blocks. But these blocks were different. They were cut with sharp, clean edges that fit together like a puzzle. No mortar, no glue, just gravity and perfect math. When the drone flew inside, the camera showed that the roof was held up by a single giant slab. It looked like it could fall at any second, yet it had stayed still since before the first king was crowned. The most shocking part was the floor. It wasn't dirt or rubble. It was polished stone, worn smooth by feet that stopped walking here a very long time ago. Along the walls, the drone spotted small carved grooves. These weren't decorations. They looked like tracks. It became clear that the door didn't just move once. It was designed to be opened and closed over and over. But why? Usually a tomb is sealed forever. You put the dead inside and walk away. This place was different. It was built to be used, like a house or a vault. As the drone moved deeper, the air temperature changed. It stayed a steady, cool 10 degrees Celsius, regardless of the storm raging outside on the Atlantic cliffs. The builders knew how to trap air and how to keep the damp Irish mist out. They understood insulation and airflow long before modern tools existed. The deeper the camera went, the more the hallway narrowed, funneling the drone toward a small, circular room at the very end. On the center of the floor sat a single object that caught the light. A bowl carved from a white stone that didn't belong in this part of the country. Who left the keys in the lock? The heart of the dark. The white bowl was not empty. As the drone's camera tilted down, the light hit a layer of fine gray ash that had sat undisturbed for millennia. Mixed with the ash were small polished pieces of bone and a single, sharp tooth from a predator that hasn't walked the Irish hills in over 3,000 years. The drone hovered, its rotors kicking up a tiny cloud of dust that shimmered like gold in the LED beam. This wasn't a random burial or a simple grave. This was a high-status offering left in a room designed to amplify every sound. When the drone's motor hummed, the walls seemed to hum back, vibrating with a low, heavy throb that shook the camera's frame. It felt as if the room itself was waking up to the sound of technology. The walls of the chamber were covered in art, but not the kind you find in a museum. There were no faces, no animals, and no scenes of daily life. Instead, there were thousands of tiny, overlapping circles. They looked like ripples in a pond or the gears of a complex clock. Each circle was cut deep into the rock with a tool that must have been harder than the limestone itself. The patterns didn't just sit on the surface. They flowed from one stone to the next, connecting the floor to the ceiling in one long, unbroken line. It looked like a map, but not a map of the land. It looked like a map of the stars, specifically the ones that only appear in the deep winter sky over the Atlantic. Behind the bowl, a small alcove held a stack of thin, flat stones. They were arranged like books on a shelf, neat and deliberate. When the drone zoomed in, the light revealed strange straight lines carved into the edges. This was Ogham, the ancient tree alphabet of Ireland, but it was a version far older than any scholar had ever recorded. The lines were sharp and deep. They didn't tell a story of war or the names of long-dead kings. They were lists of dates, a massive calendar counting the days until the sun would hit the outer door at a perfect angle to trigger the opening mechanism. This was a clock made of mountain and light. The drone moved to the back of the room, where the air felt even colder and the walls grew damp. There, carved into the very foundation of the cliff, was a second door. This one was smaller, made of dark granite brought from the mountains many miles away. It didn't have a handle or a visible seam. Instead, it had a single hole the size of a human thumb. When the drone pushed its lens toward the hole, it saw a faint blue glow coming from the other side. It wasn't fire, and it wasn't a lamp. It was a soft, steady pulse of light that seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the ocean tide outside. Every surface in this inner sanctum was polished to a mirror finish. The builders hadn't just stacked rocks. They had shaped the interior to trap and bounce light until even a tiny spark would fill the room. The drone's sensors began to glitch as it moved closer to the granite slab. Magnetic readings spiked and then dropped to zero. It was as if the room was protected by a field of energy that rejected modern electronics. The deeper the camera went, the more the hallway narrowed, funneling the drone toward a final circular space where the blue light was strongest. The dust holds a deeper DNA, the people of the mist. The blue light was not a flame. It was the bioluminescence of a rare ancient moss that only grows in the deepest, most isolated veins of the Irish earth. As the drone's camera adjusted to the glow, it revealed a chamber shaped like a giant inverted bell. This was the final room of the Tuatha de Danann, the legendary tribe of the gods, who, according to the oldest manuscripts, arrived in Ireland in a cloud of mist. They were said to have landed on the mountains and burned their ships so they could never leave. Looking at the precision of the stone around the drone, it was clear they hadn't just settled the land, they had mastered it. Archaeologists have long debated whether the de Danann were real people or just myths invented by later Celts. The drone's footage provided a definitive answer. Along the base of the bell-shaped room were several stone benches, each carved from a single block of dark granite. On these benches sat tools that looked remarkably modern: thin needles of copper, polished lenses of clear quartz, and small, flat plates of gold etched with microscopic lines. These were the belongings of a people who understood optics, geometry, and the movement of the stars. They were an elite class of builders and scientists who lived in a golden age before the records of history began. The legends say that when the Milesians, the ancestors of the modern Irish, arrived, the de Danann did not fight a war of blood. Instead, they used their knowledge to step sideways. They divided the world into two halves, the world above for the newcomers and the world below for themselves. This chamber was the physical proof of that transition. It was a bridge between the light and the dark. The drone panned up to the ceiling, where a small shaft had been cut through 300 feet of solid rock to point directly at the North Star. This wasn't just a tomb. It was an observatory, a bunker, and a sanctuary all in one. Behind the stone benches stood a series of tall, thin statues. They weren't carved to look like humans. They were elongated, with large, almond-shaped eyes and fingers that seemed to melt into the stone they held. Some believe these were the gray visitors of modern UFO lore, but the Irish tradition has a different name: the Shroud. These were the people who lived inside the hollow hills. The drone's sensors picked up a faint, rhythmic vibration coming from the statues. It was a low-frequency hum, exactly 110 hertz, a tone known to trigger a trance-like state in the human brain. The builders hadn't just created a room, they had built a machine to alter the mind. As the drone moved toward the back wall, it found the most incredible discovery of all. A large mural, painted with crushed minerals that still sparkled, showed a map of the Irish coastline. But the coastline was different. It showed islands that no longer exist and forests that were swallowed by the sea thousands of years ago. It was a record of a lost world kept safe behind a moving stone door. The de Danann knew the world was changing, and they built this place to preserve their identity before they vanished into the mist of time. They didn't die. They simply closed the door behind them and waited for someone to find the seam. Some doors are meant to keep things in, the frequency of the earth. The drone's internal stabilizers began to fight against a force they weren't programmed to handle. On the remote screen, the video feed stuttered with a rhythmic, pulsing distortion. This wasn't a mechanical failure of the hardware. It was the air itself. Every square inch of the chamber was vibrating at a constant, low-frequency hum. This specific pitch, precisely 110 Hz, is a hauntingly common feature in the world's oldest megalithic structures. It is a frequency that matches the human voice, but it does something much more profound to the human brain. Scientific studies have shown that at this exact resonance, the activity in the prefrontal cortex shifts, triggering a state of deep trance or even hallucination. The builders hadn't just carved a room, they had tuned it like a massive stone instrument. As the drone hovered in the center of the bell-shaped hall, the sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The walls, made of dense limestone and granite, acted as a natural amplifier. This was acoustic archaeology in its purest form. The people of the mist understood that sound is a physical force. They knew that by shaping a room a certain way, they could make a person feel the weight of the mountain or the lightness of a dream. To an ancient priest or scientist standing where the drone now floated, the stone door closing wouldn't just be a physical barrier. It would be the start of a sensory journey that modern science is only beginning to map. The drone's sensors picked up a series of small, hollow tubes built into the corners of the ceiling. These weren't for ventilation. They were whistles for the wind. When the Atlantic gales hit the cliff face at a certain speed, the air was forced through these stone pipes, creating a harmony that resonated through the entire structure. The moving stone door at the entrance likely acted as a reed, modulating the pitch as it slid open or shut. This meant the entire cliffside was alive with sound, a giant organ played by the weather itself. It was a security system and a temple combined into one piece of landscape engineering. As the camera panned across the floor, it noticed that the dust was arranged in perfect geometric patterns. This is a phenomenon known as cymatics, where sound waves organize physical matter into complex shapes. The vibrations of the earth had shaken the very dust of the ancestors into the same star map patterns seen on the walls. It was as if the room was constantly rewriting its own history in the dirt. The drone, a creature of high-frequency silicon and plastic, was an intruder in this low-frequency world. The magnetic interference grew stronger, pulling the drone toward the dark granite door at the back. It felt as if the room was trying to tune the machine to its own ancient rhythm, pulling it deeper into the heart of the stone. Ireland never truly forgets a face. The hungry land. The drone's signal flickered, then died as it crossed back over the threshold. Outside, the Irish sun was pale, casting long shadows across a field of vibrant emerald green. This was no ordinary meadow. It was a patch of hungry grass, a place where the soil itself holds a memory of a deep and ancient debt. To a casual hiker, it looks like a perfect spot to rest. To a local, it is a place of terror. Legend says that if you step on this specific grass, an insatiable, hollow hunger will strike your bones. You could have a bag full of food, but you would starve where you stand, unable to move, held fast by the invisible weight of the land. Scientists call it a biological anomaly. They point to the way certain minerals in the limestone affect the growth of the grass, creating a localized magnetic field that can disorient the human inner ear. But the folk history of the Burren tells a different story. They say the grass grows where the people of the mist spilled their last drop of wine before closing the stone door for the final time. It is a guard dog made of chlorophyll. The grass acts as a living tripwire, ensuring that anyone who finds the seam in the rock is too weak to actually pull it open. It is the land's own security system, protecting the frequency of the inner chamber from the noise of the modern world. As the drone pilot walked out to retrieve the fallen machine, his boots sank into the soft, damp peat. The air here felt heavy, as if the ground were breathing in. In Ireland, these are called thin places. They are spots where the distance between the physical world and the other world is reduced to the thickness of a shadow. The moving stone door was the physical gateway, but the grass was the spiritual one. The pilot felt a sudden, sharp chill despite the lack of wind. His stomach cramped with a sudden, hollow ache. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crust of dry bread, an old trick taught by his grandfather. It is a guard dog made of chlorophyll. The grass acts as a living tripwire, ensuring that anyone who finds the seam in the rock is too weak to actually pull it open. It is the land's own security system, protecting the frequency of the inner chamber from the noise of the modern world. As the drone pilot walked out to retrieve the fallen machine, his boots sank into the soft, damp peat. The air here felt heavy, as if the ground were breathing in. In Ireland, these are called thin places. They are spots where the distance between the physical world and the other world is reduced to the thickness of a shadow. The moving stone door was the physical gateway, but the grass was the spiritual one. The pilot felt a sudden, sharp chill despite the lack of wind. His stomach cramped with a sudden, hollow ache. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crust of dry bread, an old trick taught by his grandfather. The moment the bread touched his lips, the heaviness vanished. The hungry grass released its grip. He picked up the drone and looked back at the cliff. The straight line in the rock was gone. The limestone looked solid, gray, and completely natural once again. The door hadn't just closed. It had camouflaged itself back into the face of the mountain. The secrets of the 110 Hz frequency, the blue moss, and the white stone bowl were safe once more. The land had taken what it needed and gone back to sleep. Watch your step. The grass is listening. The threshold remains. The drone's memory card held the only proof of the movement. Back in the safety of a warm kitchen, the pilot watched the footage of the stone door sliding shut. On the screen, the seam vanished so perfectly that even knowing where it was, he couldn't find it again. This is the true nature of the Irish landscape. It is a place of layers, where the dirt under your fingernails is older than the concept of time, and the mountains are hollowed out by the ambitions of a people we can no longer name. We hunt for these doors because we are desperate to believe that the world is bigger than our maps. The discovery of the frequency and the white stone bowl doesn't just change history, it changes how we see the ground beneath us. It suggests that the people of the mist weren't fleeing into the dark out of fear. They were retreating into a machine they had built to preserve their minds. They didn't leave Ireland. They just went inside. Every stone circle and burial mound scattered across the 4 provinces is a potential keyhole, waiting for the right vibration or the right alignment of the sun to turn the lock. We live in a world of glass and steel, yet we are still haunted by the thin places. Whether it is a viral video or an ancient folk tale, the story remains the same. The land is not a silent witness. It is a living participant. It remembers the songs, the science, and the hunger of those who came before. The stone door remains a mystery, not because it is hidden, but because we have forgotten how to listen to the frequency of the earth. The Irish landscape remains a vault of ancient secrets, seeds, where myth and science finally meet. If you want to uncover more mysteries hidden in the Earth's thin places, stay tuned. Subscribe now to join us on our next deep dive.